We want to welcome you back to Wigs and Weaves and the Natural You. Once again, I'm your host, Hotwaxx, and we're talking about this issue of mental health and domestic violence. And we've got a special guest here today, Moxie Man, stat dropper. We got an expert that knows all about this issue of domestic violence.
He got a long line of things that he's done
I'm
that
seeing,
makes him a professional in this area.
man, we got him on here.
Yeah, let me give you a couple stats on Oliver J. Williams,
Wow.
Dr. Oliver J. Williams. So he's a professor of School of Social Work at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. He also was the executive director of Initiative of Domestic Violence in African American Community. From 1994 to September of 2016, he served as the project director of the African Immigrant and Domestic Violence Initiative. From 2010 to 2016, as I told you, he has a long stat sheet.
Yeah.
And the Safe Return Initiative that addressed prisoners, reentry, and domestic violence in 2003 through 2016. So he also directed the African American Domestic Peace Project that worked with the community leaders in 12 cities across the United States.
Wow.
From 2008 to 2018. I don't know how all these things he's done
Man.
in between the same time frame. We can go on, but we don't want to hold our special guest up. So if you want to introduce him.
Wow, Dr. Oliver Williams, welcome to Wigs and Weaves and the Natural You. Well, we know that you are an expert in the field. We appreciate you hearing about this, giving up your time, because I know the nation calls on you a number of times a year to attend a lot of things, conferences. So I wanted to get a chance, because we're going to talk about this issue of men being impacted by domestic violence. And you know a little something about that, correct?
Yeah, I do.
But, before we go there, Dr. Williams, can you tell us what is domestic violence?
Well, domestic violence can go by different definitions. It's interesting if you go on the internet and you go to different coalitions' definitions around domestic violence. It has something to do with not only attitudes but behaviors, which seeks to not only harm but to restrict and intimidate someone else for your own purposes. A person's purposes who's being violent and abusive to that individual. And it has a range of manifestations. One is physical, one is emotional. It can be spiritual. Spiritual abuse is reality. It could be financial. So there's a range of ways that people can manifest that behavior to someone who's the mostly affected by that abuse.
And so when we talk about abuse, oftentimes with domestic violence and also intimate partner violence, there's a lot of focus on women that are impacted. But what is this issue about, or what's coming out now about how men are impacted by domestic violence? Is that a myth or is that real?
Well, it's real, but I think that the thing I keep thinking about is the proportion of the victimization by that men experience. And even though it's real, the proportions of women are affected much more than men are affected largely. And I think the thing too is that you also, when you look at who's affected, because there is literature that sort of just talks about, describes it. But I think the thing is too to sort of unpack it. Sometimes when men talk about the victimization, it's not the same way, the same level, or the same result in terms of injuries that women suffer on a regular basis. And sometimes when I've talked to some men, and there are some groups that kind of try to equivocate it, saying that it's the exact same thing, and it's not, because the types of injuries and harm that women face tend to be much greater than there is for men. There aren't shelters for men, but there are battered women's organizations that may take men in, like the domestic violence hotline has been helpful in terms of trying to help men find shelter when they need it. And I've spoken to men who've been victims of abuse. So I know that it's real, but what I also know, again, is the proportion of women who suffer from domestic violence is way greater than the number of men that suffer. That doesn't mean that we need to ignore it, and maybe we need to give some attention to it. But again, women are affected much more greatly than men are.
Dr. Williams, you mentioned a word, and you mentioned it a number of times. And Moxie, man, I keep hearing this word called injury. So you're talking about somebody being injured. This is a real, because this is almost an oxymoron, because you have an intimate partner, but you got love involved, or possibly no love involved, so you got real control. But when you talk about women are injured differently, can you break that down for us a little bit?
Well, women. So when I used to do battles intervention groups, they would talk about the fact that what you would do is you could hurt somebody one time, and then but the life of the relationship, through the lifetime of the relationship, she knows that the potential for violence is real and can happen again. So psychologically, she's affected by it. But I've heard women talk about the fact that men have broken their fingers one finger at a time, that they intimidate them and not allow them to speak, that they may do things like, strangulation or choking a person, sometimes using a knife or a gun, to be able to harm a partner, and doing other things that, sexual assault of women. There was a period of time when we used to think that you couldn't rape your wife, certainly, or girlfriends. The law kind of said you couldn't rape your wife, but, we've become much more informed about that. So all of those different forms of ways that people can do it, including, there can be much more graphic descriptions in terms of how people have harmed their female partner. And everything that you can imagine is something that you can't. You know, I've known people who, their partner put them outside a window, a two-story window with their hands around their neck, asking questions like, do you love me? Now, what is she supposed to say?
I'll tell you, my
And
answer would be
then they
yes.
bring her back.
Really? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can get more graphic about it, but that gives you some sense. And clearly, the person feels disadvantaged and harmed and intimidated. So and filled with fear, and it's sometimes being fearful to leave the situation, as well. So.
Moxie, man, go ahead. What you got?
So, Dr. Williams, I have a stat, and it kind of went along with what you just mentioned. It says on an average, 24 people per minute are victims of rape, physical violence, stalking, and intimate partners in the United States. So that's what, more than 12 million women and men over the course of a year. And that's kind of went with a few of the things that you just mentioned. How does that rate in your studies and some of the people that you deal with and talk with? Are you having conversations with these folks?
With the people that do the studies, or the people that are affected by them? Because I've
Both.
talked to both.
Yeah, both. What are their interactions like? Do you have some of the, not details, but how does it get to this level? Why don't they leave in the beginning? Like, why don't they transition sooner? Do they not have people in their corner? How does it get to this?
This magnitude.
Yeah, how does that happen?
One of the things is that oftentimes men who are abusive try to isolate the female partner, cut off her connections to support systems, whether it's family, whether it's friends, and they want to basically control what she thinks and what she feels and how she sees the world and the people that can support her if she transitions. He
So
doesn't want her to transition. He wants to control her.
So in terms of our Daughters' Lives Matter, is that something that we should, in terms of the Daughters' Lives Matter movement, is that something that we should all kind of warn our daughters and sisters and moms about if they start to experience the isolation? Is that like a red flag?
Well, I think, yeah, I haven't heard of the daughters uh, movement that you're describing, but yeah, you would say that to anyone. But saying it and having them get connected to experiencing that is something that's important. The question is, how do you get them to not only hear it but believe it? How do you, there's a phrase that they used to use, and you all may have heard it too. If a young woman dates somebody that her parents may not want her to date, you've heard people say, she made her bed, now she has to lay in it.
Right.
Well, the thing of it is the fact that you can't shame somebody into listening to what you have to say. You have to stay in contact with them and don't leave them, and continue to be a support for them. And I say you have to have patience with her process. So, she may want to, she may love him and she may not understand that, and just like the men who batter don't understand that it's not an issue about a conflict, you resolving a conflict. If he's being abusive, he's got a problem he's got to resolve. He's got to change, because if he doesn't change it, he's going to be a problem in another relationship. And he keeps thinking that she needs to change. If he changes, she needs to change. If he's being abusive, he's got to change. And every relationship has conflict.
Yeah.
People have to learn how to resolve conflict or move away from conflict. But if
Yeah.
you're dealing with violence and abuse, it's a whole different other matter. And those are the things that people confuse, or what I notice on a regular basis, get confused about over time.
Wow. You know
And
what?
it's not an issue. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I think the information, the knowledge you're putting on us is just absolutely amazing. Because I'm hearing something here is that you better be careful who you get with. In the long and the short of it is that you jump in there with somebody, and you think that somebody got it going on like that, or you got your agenda, and don't realize that you could be getting into an agenda that ain't gonna be good. And so go ahead, and we're gonna wrap this up with you, and we appreciate your time. But you go ahead. You got another statement you want to make, Dr. Williams? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just that however a person gets into a relationship, he may be very charming. He may be very engaging. A lot of people may like him. A lot of times they call men who batter have a Jekyll and Hyde personality, and that people can be really engaged and charmed with him. There are a number of people in situations where I know women who've been killed, whose mother loved him and really cared about the guy, and he would sort of one situation I'm thinking about, he kind of waved the mother away from the house,
Wow.
and he went back into the house and killed the daughter.
Wow.
And so that's why I think we got to stay connected to people who've been
Well,
victimized. Not
well,
every case is a case where somebody gets killed, but you never can tell what's going to happen. So you just have to stay close to the person, your loved one, and the people that you want to support. Don't leave
well,
them alone.
Dr. Williams, I'll tell you what, we appreciate you coming on. We're going to stay close to you because you got some information that we need to have out in the streets, Moxie Man.
Indeed.
And so I know you, as the stat dropper, you put some drops on Dr. Williams, and he dropped back to you.
Yeah.
And so, Dr. Williams, thanks for coming out. We appreciate you.
No problem.
And we give you much love, and I hope to see you and talk to you about more about what's going on with this solutions to reducing or even ending domestic violence in partner relationships. Thank you, sir. Moxie Man, one of the things he mentioned was Daughters' Lives Matter.
Correct.
And, that's a shout out. That's one of the sponsors to the program because it talks about the importance of healthy father-daughter relationships. www.daughtersLivesMatter.com is their website. And, one of the segments in there is pimp proofing your daughter.
Yeah.
And basically having fathers learn the game because they used to put the game out there and pimp proofing their daughters, because it's something interesting that although you got somebody else's daughter, when your daughter get into that situation how you used to play the game and control and manipulate and hustle and bargain and barter,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? There's something interesting that happens that when that becomes your daughter and that's happening to your daughter, the game changes for you now.
Exactly.
So now we got to understand that fathers, you got to pimp proof your daughter, because a pimp ain't just on the streets. He may be like Dr. Williams said, your mama might like him.
Exactly.
Your mama might like the pimp that you brought home.
That's the less of two evils right there.
And you know the facts?
Man,
The facts
we'll
don't
get
lie.
into the facts don't lie. The facts don't lie. But let's
Well, we're going to go to a break.
okay, we'll do a
Let
break.
me tell you what, because we got some guests that's going to be coming up. And, you know, we heard from the doctor, we heard the research,
Okay.
we heard the facts. And you know about the facts. Hotwaxx.
And Moxie, man.